Moving on, Caroline, we are so glad you're here this week because we need your help to make sense of a headline I've been seeing quite a lot this week. People are starting to call this the year of the upset already. Nearly 70% of participants in survivor pools were eliminated this past weekend as favorite after favorite have just gone down. What do you make of all of these upsets, especially in week 3? Is this just kind of early season chaos that might sort of like even out and we'll see more like what we expected to see from the season? Or do you think something else is at play?
I do have to preface, one of those survivor pool losers was my own mother, who was very upset. She was very mad that she lost this week. So it's a touchy subject to bring up to her. But I would say it's a little bit of both, right? Like in the early weeks of the NFL, like probably weeks like 1 through 4, 1 through 5 maybe, teams are still figuring out kind of their offense, their defense, figuring out the scheme, figuring out how they gel with each other. Sometimes there's a lot of new people on the team. Sometimes they almost retain everyone and they only add a couple different players, but still, I think every former player talks about how hard it is to get to the Super Bowl, right? Because it's just a long season, anything can happen. And I think when you think of it like that, it's like, oh, well, if every team is like kind of similar to what they looked like last year, maybe 1 or 2 players are different, then it should be the same result. Wrong. Like it's never the same result. And that's kind of the beauty of the NFL, because like it's so unpredictable. You can have the worst team in the league with the worst record go up against the best team in the league and they just play lights out, right? So it's just like you really can't predict it. But I kind of love the upsets. It makes it so much more fun to watch because you're not just watching the same team kind of steamroll everyone. Even the teams that have gone 3-0, I would say, have had some close games. So it's kind of like, oh, maybe they're not as good as they were last year. Maybe they're still figuring things out. Or maybe this team that kind of held them to very little points is actually really good. So it's really exciting to see. And I love the underdog.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's also a sign that maybe sort of like the gulf in quality between the worst team and the best team just year after year tends to close?
Totally. I like 100% because I think that like it's so hard to even get to the NFL.
Yes, right.
And people don't realize that, right? Because it's just like, oh, obviously, like you're really good in college, you go to the NFL. Like that's not true either. You could be really good in college and still not make the cut.
It's still a
to the
very
NFL.
Small percentage of amazing football players. Yeah.
Right. You could be on the practice squad and like that is even a hard feat. So I think that when you look at the NFL across the board and you're like, oh, that team is terrible. Like in reality, they're not terrible. They're really good. It's just like you're stacked up against different types of teams that have maybe had more time to gel together, or maybe have a superstar wide receiver or have a superstar quarterback, or like different aspects like that. So it's kind of hard to play that comparison game all the time. And I do think that the discrepancy between first and last is just a lot smaller than people realize.
Also want to get some final analysis from you on those first couple weeks of the NFL season. Chiefs and Bills 3-0. What do you make of that?
I would say I'm not surprised, because they're typically the powerhouse teams, right? Like Josh Allen is Josh Allen. He's doing Josh Allen things. Like that's the best way to describe it. And same thing with Patrick Mahomes. Like he is one of the best quarterbacks that our generation is going to get to watch. So both of them going 3-0, not that surprised. There have been some close games with the Chiefs. People have been talking about like, oh, maybe Travis Kelce hasn't been getting as many receptions as you would think. And I just think it's interesting because people are always ready to nitpick apart, right? Like the best team in the league. And it's like, okay, I get it. But we're also sitting at home watching from our couches. So let's take a minute. But I'm not really surprised of both of those teams going 3-0. The Bills look really good. So that's going to be a really interesting team to follow along with.